how these pods work. So this is a 3D drawing of a typical pod, and you can see it's basically an octagonal sort of arrangement. And if you look down on it in plan, it kind of looks like a pizza, actually. But you have the symmetrical pod that we break into these different wedges, and we call these day rooms. And a day room is basically, and it doesn't have to be this size, this is just representational, but a day room is tied to the number of cells that serve the day room. And the idea behind all of this, why you need multiple ones, is inmates are classified based upon their offense, how violent they are, and so on. And it's important to allow the jail commander and the sheriff to be able to segregate inmates so that they can run the jail and keep the peace inside the jail. You have issues with gangs sometimes. You obviously can't have men and women. There can't be line of sight. You can't see each other. There's all kinds of considerations that need to happen. So we need to make allowances to make that happen. So we start with a very symmetrical layout such as this. And the day room is just that. It's just a large room that the inmates during the day, when they're not in their cells, spend their time in. There's tables in there. There's a TV. Video visitation is in there. Contact visitation doesn't happen anymore in most locations, and it's my understanding that Sheriff Herman doesn't want to do that either.
We don't do it now.
And so video visitation is the way to go, and there's basically a kiosk or like a little phone booth in the day room that has a monitor, and inmates get visitation privileges, use those monitors, and their family can dial in over the internet and visit them. So it saves, again, the movement of people, the issues with potential contraband being passed in the contact visit, those sorts of things. Also, there's often commissary kiosks, which is just another display that for those who are working in the jail or whose families have put money into their account, they can buy certain things that the jail commander will allow them to have in the jail, a candy bar or something like that. I know that what do the jail jobs pay right now, Shalon?
40 cents an hour.
So 40 cents an hour, that's before taxes. But the idea is that it becomes an incentive as well for the inmates to behave themselves but also to have access to some of those things. So the important aspect of the pod is how it's controlled, and we put pod control at the center. And pod control, think of it as an air traffic control tower. It's glazed on all sides, and these are double height spaces. What we do is we take cells, and this is an example of a 24-bed pod. So you have 12 cells, 6 stacked 2 high that are double occupancy. So it's 24 inmates per pod or per day room, and then they share this large day room. So the room is 2 stories high with a mezzanine, basically, for where the second pods are. So the control room is actually on the second level, and we do that for the reason of it creates better views into the pod. The shape of the pod is intended to, we don't want blind corners. We don't want to be able to have anybody hide behind anything when they're in the pod. So the idea is that the officers who are walking around in the hallway observing the pod, they can see into the pod, they can see everything that's going on. And in pod control, same thing. They can see everything that's going on in the pod. They control all the doors, everything's all electronic. And they're in constant communication with the officers that are on the floor. And in the event of an issue, they can shut off the power, they can shut off the water, they can shut off the lights. It's all controlled so that it gives the jail commander and the sheriff maximum control over the situation and help with keep everybody calm and behaving themselves. If you want to zoom back out. So we have these long corridors that connect the pods together, and what this corridor connects to the jail support building and goes down to central control. And central control, again, is another kind of like air traffic control control room that's all glazed, and the person in central control has line of sight all the way down the hall directly into the pod in all cases, in all pods, down in the main corridor. So whoever's working central control not only has visual control, but they also have numerous, there's dozens of security cameras, high resolution security cameras, and control monitors with touch screens, so that it's very easy to see everything that's going on in the jail at all times. Next slide, please. So you can zoom out just a titch. So the jail support functions, very quickly. So the way a jail works, I haven't been arrested, but I've designed a few jails, so I'm slightly familiar with it. I've been able to go in and out in a much more pleasant way, but the way jails operate is almost all inmates are brought in a vehicle. Usually there's been an incident, they've been arrested, they've been brought in on a warrant or arrested. And they come into what we call the vehicle sally port. The vehicle sally port is just a fancy term for a very large secure garage, basically, where the law enforcement vehicle can come in. It has a high-speed door that opens and closes very quickly. So they come inside, the door closes, and then the transfer of the arrestee into the booking area can happen safely and fairly quickly. And the idea is that you go from the vehicle sally port into booking. That's where anybody who's brought into jail is put into booking and intake. So put into a holding cell and or given a breathalyzer test or not analyzed, but scrutinized to determine whether or not they're going to be booked into jail, bailed out of jail, or what's going to be done with them. So when you're still in booking, you're not technically an inmate yet. You become an inmate once you've been booked into jail, because at booking is where you're either going to stay for a while or you're going to bail out and be released. Once you go through booking, and you have been formally booked into jail, then you go through processing, which is basically all of your street clothes are then cataloged and put into storage. You're given jail attire and basically classified and assigned to the pod in the day room that you're going to be in. Other main functions in the jail, probably the biggest functions that get the most use of the kitchen and the laundry. In a jail of 400 beds, you're talking about 1,200 plus or minus meals a day. So the kitchen and the laundry are very active facilities. They're usually running almost 24/7. They're predominantly staffed by inmates, but that's a good thing because it's kind of a good thing if you're an inmate to be able to work in the kitchen or in the laundry as opposed to spending your whole day sitting in the day room. You're able to earn that 40 cents an hour, but also you're able to get out of the pod. Some jails also have programs where, specifically in the kitchen, they have a program with the inmates that they can earn their food handler's permit while they're in the jail working on the cooking line, so that when they are released from jail, they have a skill to go out and get a job with. The amount of sheer meals and laundry that is dealt with on a daily basis is phenomenal. It's very much like a very large hotel. So the kitchen spaces and the laundry spaces have very high capacity, commercial grade and industrial grade equipment. They're also probably two of the most expensive spaces in the jail from a cost per square foot point of view, but they're absolutely necessary because they're really the heart and soul of what makes the jail operation go. If you could zoom back out to that. So when I mentioned central control, that's this red polygon here, and this crossing corridor is that main corridor that we're talking about. Once inmates come in through booking and intake, but those who work at the jail come through the jail admin area, and all the officers who work in the jail, there's a locker room, there's break rooms, there's all of their office functions. And there's a portion of that that is outside of the secure perimeter. But once the officers suit up and go through, we call them sally ports. They're at every point where you pass through from the secure perimeter to the non-secure perimeter is a sally port. A sally port is basically like an airlock where you go in, detention grade door, that door closes behind you before the next door opens. And they're programmed that way so that you really can't, nobody can rush through a sally port in either direction. So once you go through the sally port, you're now in the secure perimeter and you're in the jail. So this corridor is in the jail, and central control is located such that these lines of sight down all these corridors are cleared and maintained at all times. Next slide, please. So some of the other functions of the jail that are important, jail administration I mentioned. You still have a need for offices for the jail commander and the other folks that work within the jail. There are program spaces within the jail, as I mentioned, classrooms, chapels. In a two-pod scenario, we would put the chapel and the program spaces in the medical bay in the second pod. In a one-pod scenario, we'd need to put the program spaces back into part of the admin building, so to leave room for the pod, so we had enough capacity for inmates in the pod. Also, you have to have outdoor recreation yards are required. One of the concerns that was raised in one of the public meetings was, what is when we drive by the jail, are we going to see razor wire and searchlights? And the answer is no. The recreation yard is a walled-in yard that, from the street side, just looks like a nice masonry wall. All of the necessary things like razor wire are on the other side of the wall, out of sight, and the wall is tall enough that it can't be climbed. But you do need to provide outdoor recreation for folks. One of the issues with the outdoor recreation space is that that's another place where contraband can enter the jail. It's common where outside folks will throw contraband over the wall into the yard, and inmates will retrieve that and then bring it into the jail. That can be accomplished by locating the recreation yard far enough away from any public road that nobody really wants to walk up 100 yards or something to get to the wall to throw it over. Or we've even seen at Uinta County and King County, we actually put a mesh screen over the lid of the outdoor yard so that if any contraband was thrown in, it landed on top and then was taken care of later. So finally, storage is the thing in these types of projects that always gets underestimated. And whenever there's a budget crunch rate, the storage rooms get smaller. I think Sheriff Carpenter and Shalom can tell you that storage is a premium in any jail. You need a lot of storage for lots of different things, so we don't want to shortcut that. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned before, the second floor is where we would locate the sheriff's office. There is a public lobby for these buildings where the public can come in, because the sheriff does have to interact with the public from time to time, the press or people that are coming to visit. And so there is a small public lobby that will take somebody from the public up to a reception desk that becomes a secure control point for security reasons and obvious reasons. Folks just can't wander into the sheriff's office and go down and knock on his door. You need to be let in. There's a lot of sensitive things that are back there that need to be for those allowed in only. So we don't need to provide, there's not a lot of public space in these facilities in terms of for somebody to just walk in. But it is accessible to the public, and in the event that we put the third-party lease space, which would be a third level on top of the sheriff's office, there would be a common elevator that would take you up to common public lobbies, and then the public could be allowed in at that point. Next slide, please. So one of the approach we've taken on this project, this is the two pod configuration that I was discussing earlier, where the first pod is basically the pod for the males, just because the proportion of male inmates is still significantly higher than that female inmates. But this approach puts the female inmates in the second pod, so that they're not only visually separate, but they're physically completely in another jail pod. And special needs areas like medical, psychiatric, addiction, and others could be separated in some of the other day rooms that aren't required for female inmates. These are also stacked too high. So on the upper level, you basically take the same floor plate and you stick it on top of like a birthday cake, if you will. And it gives the sheriff and the jail commander the flexibility to either repeat the same floor plan and layout below, or we studied looking at an option where on the second floor, it was lower risk classification inmates, where we would have, instead of 12 2-man cells, we would have 3 8-man cells. So almost a dormitory situation probably for folks who are serving more misdemeanor type offenses rather than violent offenders, or even work release sorts of inmates. But it just gives the jail commander and the sheriff maximum flexibility to program their jail to extend its lifespan, to get maximum efficiency, and to house as many inmates as is practically possible without going to massive or expensive remodeling or reconfiguration of the jail. In a jail, you can't just stop running the jail to do interior remodels. You need to, those people don't go away. So the more flexibility we build into the process, the better that will work for us. The other thing I'd like to mention in terms of the design and construction process, jails are very specific. It's a very specialized type of design, both for the design side, for architects like myself, but also on the construction side. Not every contractor builds jails, and it's important that the architect and the builder that you select for this project are experienced in this building type, because the level of detail, and you get down to how these buildings go together, types of doors and hardware, the security electronics, and just the general functions and requirements of the jail. There's a ton of stuff you don't see above the ceiling and behind the walls that are absolutely necessary to the proper function of a jail. So as you make the selection for your design team and your contractor, it's very critical that you select a team, those individuals that have that experience. And we also recommend that jails, these aren't projects that you just design, get it all designed, and then put it out on the street for a bid. The construction market and building market is very volatile right now. The cost of materials is very expensive. We recommend what we call a design assist approach, where right after the county would hire the design team, we would highly recommend that you immediately thereafter select the contractor. And the reason for that is the contractor then becomes a part of the team from the beginning and takes place in the same design meetings as the architect and the county in meetings, and provides real-time cost estimating during that process, so that after we've gone through these many months of design, when we get to the end, we know exactly what it's going to cost and what you're going to get. And we have lots of detailed discussions about the sheriff may want this thing, and we say, well, we can do that, but it costs this much, and you might have to give up this other thing. But it's very important that we go through this process, because then it maximizes the value to the county at the end, that you get the jail that maximizes the budget you're able to spend on the jail. Jails are not traditionally money makers, but you don't want to be building them every 10 or 15 years either. This is really meant to be a 30 to 50 year facility. So we want to get it right. Real quickly, we go through the programming process, which is basically sitting down with the jail commander and the sheriff and other stakeholders we go space by space, room by room, item by item, and do a very detailed analysis of exactly what this facility is going to be. And that defines square footages, all of the functions that are required. Once we've done that, we then start the actual design, where we put pen to paper, or I guess now electrons to monitors, and start fleshing out actual designs. What you've seen to date are very conceptual designs based upon our understanding of the general size of things, but we need to validate that. And then once we get into construction, that's it's probably about a 2-year process to build a jail like this. And again, the architect is involved from the beginning all the way until the occupancy, and same with the contractor if you go with the design build or design assist approach. Next slide, please. So this is just diagrammatic to kind of show the whole picture of how it works. And you can see the pods. The one on the left is the main level, the one on the right is the upper level. You can see on the upper level, the pod control is on the second floor. It's completely isolated from the jail. There's no physical way to get the pod controls down to the floor in the jail pod without going out the door, down the hall, down the stairs, back in through level 1. That sounds kind of silly, but the idea is that that pod is kind of like the Alamo. If things really go sideways in the jail pod, it's not accessible to the inmates, and it would take, and the control could be maintained for a long period of time before it was compromised. We've never seen an instance where that's happened, but we build that in to the design so that it gives that flexibility. It also makes it so folks, the sheriff and the jail commander can hire additional staff to work in the pod control that don't have to be able-bodied in terms of having to deal physically with the inmates, because it's an accessible route and totally safe. If you zoom back out just real quickly, you can see on the left-hand side the different functions with the jail support, vehicle sally port, booking and intake. We have the laundry, the kitchen, some of the support space is the programming, and then there's usually a work release room for inmates that are allowed to be released. Sometimes folks serving a DUI conviction, for example, might have to come in on the weekends, or there's other inmates that maybe trustees that are allowed to go out and do yard work or something. That's what that's for, but it's secure just like the jail. Next slide, please. These are just some, this is just some examples. This picture here to the upper right, that's a typical day room. You can see the pods, or the cells, excuse me, against the back wall. You can kind of see the bunks. There's two per cell, and they're stacked too high. You have the tables, and what you can't see because the photo is you have TV stalls and then the kiosks for the visitation. Showers, facilities are contained in the cells themselves. There are showers on the ends. In fact, this is the shower. You can see now. This is a typical courtroom. One thing that we haven't programmed on this project but has been discussed is potentially one of the reasons for picking this size, potentially making or having
the capacity to have the circuit court eventually co-locate nearby the building on the site to shorten the distances. Uinta County and at the Ute Tribe, we actually had it part of the building. You can see that now. That photo on the left, that's part of a typical kitchen. And then the laundry facilities. These are those washing machines they're big enough you could climb in one. I wouldn't recommend it, maybe it. And then kind of the typical public lobby space and some more kitchen views. And this is a pod control room here. You can see the touch screens they have, so they can see the inmate. They can pop the door when the door needs to be opened or lock it down. Next slide, please. Okay, so Layton Construction Company was kind enough to help us with some cost estimation, kind of ballpark cost estimating for a couple of the schemes that were discussed. It's basically based upon the 1-pod and the 2-pod option. There is an intermediate option, which is to do what we call shelling, which is to build basically the superstructure of the pod, but not finish out the interior of it until you need it. But what it does is it gets that superstructure in place so that it's just an interior remodel at that point rather than a very expensive ground up construction. Like I mentioned before, jails are quite expensive. This is all in the document that will be posted to the site, but if you could scroll, yeah, if you could scroll, there's a summary sheet.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but basically, in a nutshell, the cost ranges, we're around $50 million for a 1-pod option, and it's about $72 million for a 2-pod option right now, a full build out. And then there's intermediate points in between. Obviously, the decision as to which direction we're going, that's up to the commissioners.
Does the single pod option include the stubbing in for a second pod?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Even if we just build a single pod option, this building's still designed, and we would still extend, stub out utility runs and things like that for a future second pod. The reality is that in today's environment, well, this has held true forever, but especially now, you really want to build as much as you can afford today, because tomorrow it's going to be more expensive. And there's just nothing that changes that. We used to see an escalation factor of between 4 and 5% per year 2 or 3 years ago. It's more like 10 or 12 now. And we don't know how long that'll last, but one of the purposes of this design process that I've explained, and the reason why bringing on the contractor early on in the process is important, is because these are very big dollar decisions that affect the county and affect the sheriff long term in terms of how it will function. Jails are usually a one-shot deal every 30 years or so we need to get it right. So studying the various options is how we start these processes and how it works, so that we provide the county and the sheriff and the jail commander with the maximum amount of information so they can make an informed decision as to which direction to go. And whichever direction that is, the building will be designed in a manner that it will be the best possible version of that building we can come up with and that you can afford. So I think that's, let's see, if you could go to the kind of the last, there's a summary at the very end. So recommendations, obviously the 2-pod version is the belt and suspenders version that solves all your problems from an operational and growth point of view. But also is the most expensive. A single pod version will certainly work and will certainly be an improvement over what you currently have. And whichever version is selected, we feel confident that we can provide a project and a building that will meet all the needs for many years to come. So we're grateful to the commission and to Sheriff Carpenter and Shalon and everybody else for the time that they've spent with us and sharing their information. And we appreciate, I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. I think we'll just move to some questions. If anybody has any questions, any concerns, it's not a public hearing by any means, but we do have staff here that if they want to talk and you know.
I have a question.
Okay, will you come up?
I've got a lot of voice, you can hear me.
Okay.
I just really question on the.
State your name, please.
Scott Phillips, sorry. City Council. What is in the pod support, those halls that lead? Because it said pod support, what goes in there?
Yeah.
And my other question I have to remember, I just lost it, but it'll come back to me.
Okay.
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
So the pod support, because these are, because they're two-story buildings, well, they're technically kind of almost four, but because they're multi-story buildings, we have stairs, elevators, mechanical shafts, and other ancillary functions. So we just.
It's not offices leading.
No, it's just, it can also be the sally ports to let them out into the yards, depending on where the yards are. Sometimes the yards are, we use the pod in a building to create two of the walls of the yard. So sometimes inmates go out through that connector. Sometimes they go out through the inside. So it's just kind of this.
So my next question is, if you go with the one pod option, where would the female inmates go? And does that provide the proper security for female inmates?
Where they're actually located ultimately is the decision of the sheriff and the jail commander. Where we have a two-story arrangement, it's probably, I mean, it stands to reason that perhaps the females would be on one level and the males could be on the other level. We have other facilities. Kane County is one of them, and Uena County does this too, where they're all in the same pod, but they've added some additional demising walls where they brought these walls out to the central core and created kind of a pod within a pod, if you will. But it is somewhat problematic because the idea with the programming space, the med bays, and some of the programming spaces, that's for all inmates. So you still have to solve the segregation and the visual break issue, but it can be done.
Come up. State your name.
Yes, I'm Cheryl Wicker. I'm actually a resident right there, so most of my concerns are about that. So how many trips, and maybe the sheriff can answer this, how many trips would be made per year to doctors and courts? And what's the estimate of how often that happens if, and then opposed to if the medical facility is in the pod, and then if a court was in the pod? So about how many trips would you say you make to take people out of the jail?
Yeah. So From a medical standpoint, as far as the hospital itself, it's for critical incidents. We have medical staff in the jail. So currently we have a registered nurse and advanced EMTs that are in the medical staff that will deal with the day-to-day medical issues.
Right.
But anytime that there's anything like currently, anything like dental issues or serious medical issues, anything like that, then we have to transport them out. And, where we don't have the funding to be able to fund a doctor and a full medical staff, that's not going to change. We're still going to have to take a lot of those folks out. But as far as like dental and things like that, we can bring a dentist in, be able to treat them if we have those types of medical facilities within the jail. As far as transport to courts, that's all the time. And a lot of it just depends on the court schedule. So because of coronavirus, a lot of that's been done through web court and things of that nature. But we don't know whether Utah courts is going to continue that when we kind of get back to full purpose. And a lot of, now that the courts are opening up more frequently, we're doing transports pretty close to every day except for weekends, back and forth.
So do you know how many critical instances there were in Iron County in the past year, so that we could kind of get a?
Do you have a number for that, Sean?
I don't, we do,
I mean, are we talking like 1,000 or,
no,
or
we
like,
don't have it.
Sean, could you come
Oh,
back?
yeah.
I mean, I don't even know ballpark, right? Are we talking hundreds or thousands or?
As far as critical incidents, I would say that you're probably in more of a 10 per year range. We do have routine medical that we go off site for. We also do a dental run once a week.
Meaning,
So if we have inmates that need to go to the dentist, we transport them to the dental facilities once a week. We do have a doctor that comes in once a week, so we don't have to take our inmates out every week to go to the doctor. They come in. We also have we have a therapist that comes in once a week, so we don't take them off site for that. But as far as like pregnant inmates and that kind of stuff, we do have to take them to the facility.
two, okay.
One thing on that too is that in the medical aspect or portion of the building in the support area, it's common to put a dental chair in kind of have a small procedure room, so a dentist can be brought in, and even things like haircuts and simple things, but it ultimately comes down to available providers for that.
Gotcha. So, but wouldn't it make sense then to have a court facility within the pod so that we could reduce those transfers as well?
That's all under the Utah State Department of Courts. That's entirely up to them.
Okay.
We
where
have
they
reached out to
courts,
them.
and we have reached out to them.
Well, I would recommend that as a person that lives right there, that would be great to eliminate that transfer. If transfers are truly where it's scary, I would like that,
That's part of the reason, that we're looking at that large of a parcel of property, is because ultimately we would like to encourage the Utah courts to move the 5th District Court and the Iron County
and do you
Justice
think
Court
that's
right next door to us.
feasible?
Not today, it's not, but eventually I think it will be, because currently the 5th District Court has 3 courtrooms. They've used up every bit of space that they have in the current 5th District Court. But as it is today, they can only hold 1 jury court at a time because they have no place to sequester their jurors, so they have to use one of the other courtrooms to sequester their jurors. As the county continues to grow, they're going to quickly outgrow the current courthouse. And at
And so
that,
that's what you're wanting, that buffer zone, or
Right.
that front area will be public buildings, courts, things like that.
right, so
And
what
these
we
are
would,
places that won't provide that they won't pay taxes, is what I'm getting at.
Right on that particular parcel property. Nothing will extend out past that parcel property.
I wondered about this.
And
something
I-
else.
and
Before you move
probably-
to another, so I wanted to say something before you move on, but
Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
wait for you to be done.
I was gonna say, and it probably won't even require all that property, but we wanna make sure that we have the room that we need for the things that we need to provide.
Right,
So I was gonna say, we have talked to
Could you tell us your name,
the
sir?
courts, Dan Jessen,
Thank you.
Iron County Auditor. And we have talked with the courts. They're saying that they're happy. They have a limited budget on real estate expansion and things like that. Now, to give you an idea of their mindset, they want to be as close to city center as possible.
right, that
And
makes sense.
that's one of their main things. So as we've been looking at sites, we wanted to stay close enough that we could incentivize them to come out and still be within that criteria of city center. And the main reason is because they want to be accessible to the public that comes to the courts. They don't want to be way out. But we really don't have any ability to make them come. We would just like them to come.
Right.
It helps us for them to be close to us, but that's not really part of what goes into their thinking. Now, one thing I do want to say is they did just purchase land around the court. In fact, we bid against them because we have our justice court and they have their district court. They just bought the land to the south and to the east in a recent auction, maybe 3 years ago. It was when Dale Brinkerhoff was still on the commission. 4 years ago. How long have you been here, Paul?
It's been 6 years ago.
So they have acquired land there. We would like to have them come. So when it comes time for them to do something else with their building, I think it's going to take an entire community effort to try to put as much pressure on them to co-locate near us as possible. They won't take, so we're going to use the back 15 acres for this.
Right.
We will own the entire parcel. We're going to keep that open to see if we can get them to come. Now, let's say that they go ahead and they decide to stay pat. Let's say stand pat, say they expand, and unfortunately, we can't get them to come out. At that point, if we have not utilized that space for anything else, we could use it for something government. We could turn that back, sell it to commercial land. I mean, that is miscellaneous, could be used for whatever. Even if they locate out there, maybe they've taken an acre for their building. It's not like they're gonna use up the, 25 acres out front.
So would that just be, just sitting there for years and years and years
Course.
while we decide?
It's gonna sit there until we can find the best and highest use. The best and highest use may be for it to turn back to commercial land and be sold off. But
But the vision is to get everybody out there if you can,
if
courts.
we can get the courts out there, that's the number one priority of the counties.
Uh-huh.
Short of that, is there another use that the county could use it for that would be a highest use? And if that isn't the case, and the highest use is to turn around and make that commercial land, then it will be zoned commercial and will stay zoned commercial, but it'll stay, what do you call that, brown? Greenfield or something like that. Of course, we'll keep it maintained so it doesn't look ugly or whatnot, but
So, but the county will be in charge of that, we won't know what.
we'll own it until we can
Okay.
find the highest and best use.
All
That's
right.
all I wanted to say.
What's the purpose of actually, you answered that, thank you. How many acres are available after the 38-acre parcel, in the Auto Mall area, including the trust lands? How many acres are left for commercial space, after you remove that?
A lot.
Talking just the auto mall property?
Well, just how
the
many
whole area?
acres of commercial spaces, just taking out the 38
Well, that's
acre
reference,
parcel?
that's a 37-acre parcel, so at least 100.
So with the
Where do you
trust
draw
lands-
that line? Do you go
You're right.
south? I mean, how far south do you go?
Probably to Main Street, probably to the
Well, then
Main
there's
Street by
there's a
Love's.
ravine that runs on the south that's kind of a natural dividing line. You can kind of tell that the foothills start where the Cedar Creek
Yes.
start.
I'm talking
along
right,
here.
these
Oh, yeah.
areas that could be commercial areas,
that's about
this
30
one,
acres.
that could be, so this is about 30 acres, and then what about this, what's
That's
this?
settling, that's in the ground, and, do we have settling here? I'm not,
I'm here.
Oh, yay, Sidla,
We have 80 acres adjacent to the south.
okay. And what
So these are all commercially developed sites or
right,
privately developed sites. And I mean, I don't know what the individual acreage is, but those are all already available
Also,
sites. And
on
they're
both
the-
sides to the south,
Yes.
there is all commercial by Loves and both sides of those. I've talked
Yeah,
to
here.
property owners that are wanting to sell for sure. And to the north of us also, I've talked to a gentleman that wants to use that for commercial also.
Okay.
So there's a lot.
Fair enough. Oh, and one more. Oh, can you show us, in relation to the site, where the 20-acre parcel that is set aside for recreational, and park use in the Fiddlers area? There's been some confusion about where that park is
I
located.
don't know where that is.
That's owned by Cedar City and it's 42 acres.
Here's the,
Okay.
I believe it's up in here.
Is that it?
It's that, there you go, where your hand is, right here, that's it. Yeah.
So here's the Sitla 40
This is
acres,
Sitla.
Sitla 40 acres.
Sitla,
Here's the
20
Cedar City
acres,
owned, this is
right
owned
here.
by Linford Nelson. Right
Okay.
here's the
so
Cedar
the trail would, the existing trail would be right there, and then that part, is that right? Those who know?
Yeah, that's, so I just had my hand on that.
Yes,
So this is BLM,
right?
here Jonathan.
Just trying to get up there.
Okay.
So that's, in fact, that zoomed out a little bit more. So BLM, Cedar City, Sitla, that's Linford Nelson. Fiddlers, that says Fiddlers, and
private.
normally that's private. And that's the parcel we're looking at. This is all the auto mall stuff.
Okay,
And then there's kind of the topography. Let's see if I could,
That's a big wash that goes down.
yeah,
Right,
let's see if I
It's
can
probably not usable for filming.
kind of show that a little bit. Where are we? So,
oh,
yeah, sorry, I make you sick there. I kind of went fast. So here we are, this is, let me make sure. Okay. I normally can turn on parcels, but I don't have that right now. So there's the parcel we're looking at, there's Sitla, there's the Cedar City piece. But as you can see, there's kind of a knoll that runs down and then this wash that runs through. There's been some discussion about what to do with this underpass and traffic flow, especially as it affects this intersection here.
Like,
This is
By Maverick.
bowling alley and the Maverick. If that, what are you grinning about?
I was gonna ask him to speak into a
Oh,
microphone.
I don't have one. I should speak into a microphone.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
John Whitaker, County Clerk. I'll tell you what my son calls me.
Dad.
Dad, he calls me Dad, lovingly. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
no.
No.
I wasn't quite sure. So you showed me some BLM land and then the Sitla parcel, but where is that part? I'm sorry.
right there.
So
So
the BLM,
Cedar,
this
that's
is
gonna be
the
the park.
Cedar City Corporation is the set aside.
so it's right on the other side.
Yeah, so almost straight south from that east part.
So I
of the parcel.
believe that'd be a mile to the edge. That's probably a section, wouldn't it be?
No, it's a
Well,
mile.
it
No,
might be
it's
a
only
quarter.
a half mile to the nearest home when we walked it. So that would have to be about a quarter mile.
We could sure will.
That's what Reed's shaking his
Maybe
head,
6
a quarter mile.
What was that? Roughly a quarter mile?
Oh, hello. So, yeah, quarter mile is 2640. So that's a bit less. Yeah.
Quarter seven.
Oh, yeah, 2640 is half a mile. So, yeah,
And what about the
1320.
nearest home? So quarter mile to that, what about the nearest home?
Let's see. So that's a little over half a mile. 2640 is half a mile. That's
Is there any
existing.
policy on how close a jail can be to that nearest home or to the?
No, that's a great point. So let's take a look at the existing jail. So, oh, I've lost myself. Thank you. So there's the existing jail, and I mean, there are homes there, so from the corner, oh, I lost
So
my-
there's no
No.
They share a fence line on the one side, on the east side.
Say again?
They share a fence line on that east side.
Oh,
The jail.
yeah. Oh, right here, yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah, so there's that's the property line, the building itself, so that back lot neighbor is the jail's back lot neighbor, so the answer currently is zero.
We share a
Right.
fence
Yeah.
line.
Do we have anybody else that has questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dixon Tiffany, to the record.
Hey.
We go back to that other, up there. So, okay, so the way I understand it, so you're talking about 50 million for one pod and 72 million for two pods, roughly. Okay, so this area here, does that include acquisition of the land?
I believe that's just construction costs.
That's what I thought.
It'd be, yeah, not including any
So
land.
how much are we looking at to buy, to purchase that?
We haven't negotiated that yet. So
Estimation?
We're getting appraisals right now, and things will be based on appraisals.
But there's no estimation.
not yet.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, I don't know who can answer it, but, I'm sure the county would incur expenses improving this road to the site. And that's obviously gonna enrich the property owners adjacent to that, whether it be Sitler or Linford or whoever. What kind of, arrangement can we make with the improvements, curb gutter, sidewalk, utilities? So that when those property owners pull a building permit, we can recoup those investments the county's made. I don't know who, Tyler, would that be something you can help
Oh,
us
yeah.
with?
That'd be great.
That's come up and it's a really good point.
So the city will will facilitate a reimbursement agreement where it's on the books for 10 years. And then any adjacent property owner that comes in will pay per foot what that cost is for their section of benefiting from your roads.
What triggers that? Is it when they pull a building permit? Is it?
It would be, well, we do it at final plat. So I think that's what would be the trigger. They start putting in those improvements and then that's when that reimbursement comes to you.
So what would happen after the 10 years? Nothing?
Nothing.
A lot of building would happen right after 10 years.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and we've had developers come in and say, well, let's do it 30-year or 20-year. Well, government's just not good at tracking
Out that
things like
far.
that.
Is that state law or what is that?
No.
That 10 years or is that
It's an
county?
agreement with
That's city policy. And I say policy, it's not written policy.
Procedure.
Yeah, it's just what we've done.
But to be clear, both the city and the county would benefit from increased tax revenues from the development. I mean, it's not a zero-sum game. Sure.
Tyler, while you're up here, I wanted to ask you a question.
Obviously, the improvements we put on the property that we purchase as a county, we can recoup that when we sell, obviously sell lots to commercial construction. But yeah, that would be, that's just something that's come on the.
So I just wanted to ask, and we do have, planning commission here and some of the city council, and certainly if they have any technical questions, now is the time to ask those of our the guy we hired to do our feasibility study. I'd call him the architect, but he's only an architect if he gets hired to be the architect. As of right now,
I'm just a guy.
He's a guy. He's a guy. But so when it kind of comes down to implementation, would we be able to transfer water shares that have been given to the city for the old jail to the new jail, depending what's done with the old site? Is that administrative stuff that's got to be worked through, or is there clear policies in place? Maybe you could comment on it.
So we'll need to work through that. It would depend what you're gonna do with that old site. That's gonna hinge really on water. Can I ask one question while I'm up here?
Yeah.
So I have an interest in programming. Are we gonna have more space for programming in the new jail, which means more groups can go?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Very good, very good.
Absolutely, yeah. we're very limited. Come on up, Scott. We're very limited on that, on our programming. And Shalon tells us all the time that we have a lot of groups that want to come in and help, and we just don't have and so that's definitely something that we're looking at more closely.
And I would like to ask Rob, how would that look, one pod versus two pod as far as programming?
If you can go to that overall diagram.
These or?
Yeah, this works. Yeah, so, well, actually, the one that had the two side-by-side color,
Okay.
yeah, that one. So in this scheme, one of these was the male, and I think this one we designated male just for the sake of the conversation. That this was the male pod. This was the female pod on the ground floor. On the upper floor of the male pod were more of those lower risk kind of the 8-person bed. So there's 3 large cells instead of 12 smaller ones. Now, whether or not all that needs to be used is, needs to be seen, but you could have some program space on the second floor in this pod. In the current scheme that we laid out, we left 3 more of the pods for the female inmates in the more dorm configuration. But then we had chapel, and then we had 4, we're calling them classroom program spaces. They're basically just multi-purpose day rooms that then have classrooms. So there's actually 8 classrooms, 4 day rooms. So you do group therapy, you do private classrooms. There's a lot of different things you can do. So in the event that you only went with 1 pod, you would have to accommodate the males and the females all in the 1 pod, and it would likely push the medical, the chapel, and the majority of the program space out to the support building. So this support element would probably get incrementally larger to accommodate that.
Sorry, Scott.
Hey, while you're explaining pods, can you explain how a 2-story is really 3 stories? Because I think that maybe there's some confusion.
Yeah, so if you remember if you go to that picture of that day room, I think it's the next slide.
Okay.
So the cells are stacked too high. So the ceiling in the day room is about 20 feet. So you really have a really tall, what's the equivalent of a 2-story space? It only counts technically as 1 story, but it is the height of 2 stories. That can be repeated again on the top, or it could also be in the event if it's the 8-person cells, you don't have to stack them too high. So there's a lot of variables, especially at this point in the game, but you really do end up with the equivalent of a 3 to 3.5 story pod when it's built.
Most of the ones that we looked at when we looked at those other jails was just a 1-story on the top, right?
Yeah, that's what we did at Uinta County.
Yeah.
At Uinta County, they did a dorm arrangement on the upper level, so it was only about 14 feet tall as opposed to 20 in the level below.
Scott?
All right.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Well, 20 stories, 20 feet is 2 stories. So my question is, if you could go back to the map, sorry. And while I was bringing that up, one of my other questions is, when you were looking at the proposed sites, because you can imagine since March 14th, we received a lot of emails from a lot of folks. My question is, did you look at any other industrial zone sites within Cedar City's area? But that's a question we're getting a lot. So I want to make sure that I get a clarification on that so we have a proper response back to our citizens. So that would be question number 1. Question number 2, has there been any interest, and maybe this is a question for our CITLA representative, in the property that is there, the Prospect Trust Lands? Is there any interest in that property recently?
We
have come to Mike and say your name and all that.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey everybody, my name is Greg MacArthur. I work for CITLA, School Institutional Trust Lands Administration. I'm relatively new there. I'm over the Iron County area lands. So to answer that question on the interest in this, we constantly have developers looking and talking to us about these lands. So I've been with the organization for 6 months. In the last 6 months, I've probably had 4 development groups talk to us and say, hey, is that ready yet? Hey, we would love. So I don't know if everybody knows kind of how we work with, typically what we do is when we have these large tracts of land, we pick large developers, reach out to us, and then we'll partner with them. So we'll throw in the land and then they'll start developing. So when it goes, it usually starts to go pretty quick. We've just been waiting for this parcel. We're on a north intersection here in Cedar City, and just as things grow, we don't have any holding costs on the land. And so just as time goes on, it gets worth more and more. And so we wait for the right time to release it. So that's what we've been waiting for on these lands. So just to go a little bit further, if that's okay. So I actually just found out about the jail coming in just last Friday, and I was pretty surprised that it hadn't been notified for the largest landowner adjacent. I was surprised to find that out. This definitely will affect what we can do on these lands. In the 90s, no, I'm sorry, in the 2000s, early 2000s, about 2005 or 6, there was a master plan done that Sitla participated in on this area. And it had mixed use and commercial and different things. That land use plan clearly is now 15 years old, and the amount of growth that's happened in Cedar City and Iron County, that's way a long time ago. So we think it might be time to do something new. What we would like and ask from Sitla would be, if this is the chosen location for the jail, is just to work with us to help us replan these lands out so we get the highest and best use. That's our entire goal. Sitla School Institutional Trust Land is, what we do is we sell and develop lands so we get money, and we try to get the most amount of money out of them so we can give it to the school kids. That's what our whole intent and purpose is. And so Sitla would be willing to get a national level, or whoever we choose, planner, to do a planning for this area. Another thing that I was thinking that we could maybe look at, if the city, since we have city and county representatives here, is this Cedar City Corporation. That was a Sitla parcel. That was traded. That's 40 acres. We traded it for 4 acres back in 2018 to help a development that's going down in the southern end of Cedar City, the Iron Horse development. And we put a deed restriction on that says it has to be used for a park. So that's the only thing it can be used for right now. If we wanted to, if we think for the city, and again, this is just discussion. All I'm doing is just throwing things out there that we try to plan for this. If we think that there might be better development that happens here on the Utah Trust state lands as we do a master plan, we'd be willing to swap some of this to make a buffer that goes between that and then release the deed restriction so the city can do whatever they want with it, keep a park or do something else. But just ideas. That's all I'm looking for, is just as we have this, as I've just found out about it, we'd love to work with the city and the county to make this a great success up in that area with our lands. We're open to do whatever people would like to do.
Since you know this topic, putting a prison in that area, is that going to promote commercial restaurants, housing developments, or is it going to do processing?
So I'd like to have historically. I think, the one answer I could have is currently, so if I look at this plan, I brought the old plan. We had like residential units right there that were like commercial on the bottom, residential on top. I don't think you get that there right now. There would need to be a buffer between it as for planning purposes. And so I think you have to have some type of straight commercial, but if you get a little bit of a buffer area, get a street or so between there, street or two, then you can have residential go in. But I think the key is to get a really good plan for it. And if we have a good plan going forward, then as the developers, the really large developers that might want to look at this going forward, that we would partner with, we could say, here's the plan that we have, here's the zoning, and here's what we have, and I think they'd be okay with it. But I think it just needs to be planned correctly.
We've actually found with the other facilities that we've designed that more development is coming around the facilities after they've been built, because typically the jail has to bring in new utilities and things like that. But sometimes that's the stumbling point for somebody to develop around them. The brand new prison site up in Salt Lake, that's way out in the boonies, east and north of the airport. There's already industrial pads being graded and constructed right next door to the prison, which was put way out away from everybody on purpose. because all those utilities were now brought out to those sites and made those sites developable.
But the north end of town needs businesses, restaurants, stores.
Washington County is a good example of that also. They put their jail facility out in Purgatory for a reason, and they built all around it. They have a huge fairground complex, racetrack, the 4-H is there now, the extension office. So, you know, it brings in the development. We've seen it over and over and over again.
Oh, no, we already got, I'm sorry, yeah, we already got them.
Come up to the microphone.
Yeah.
After Scott's done, maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
No,
sorry.
I can be done for now.
I'm just waiting for the response to the
Don't
second,
go
the first
What
question.
what was your first part about?
It was so long ago. What
I
is
can
it?
answer, I remember it, Scott.
Yeah, I do. too.
So when we were looking originally, we were looking at places that were already zoned, and that were for sale. And the only other site that we could get that was close to city center, again, trying to consider all these factors, was the Speed site.
Is that primarily because of acreage and state might be available? Okay, thank you.
I just had a
Could you
question.
tell
that-
us your name?
Oh, Terry Hartley, with the Cedar City Council. I've had a lot of questions about the recreational land at Cedar City Corporate. You said that you would release the deed restrictions, but there's been a lot of question, you own other land, excuse me, that's closer to Main Street. Would you be willing to make a further trade or not for something that's more removed from that jail site?
So that's a great question. As long as what we do is, if we're trading, first of all, we want to work with municipalities and make sure that we get the best outcome for the municipality. But when we look at trading things, we look at values. So we usually try to trade value for value. So if the value on Main Street can equal what we think the value of this will be based on appraisals, then we'd be open to trading that type of thing. Something we'd be willing to look at.
I just wanted to point out that one thing that we do have is the old jail site that we are also looking for the highest and best use and can factor into this entire discussion. We are committed to not leave a hulk of a building sitting there and turning into another old hospital. That could be utilized for commercial space, that could be utilized for, even heard somebody throw out the other day, park space, whatever the case may be. It could be remodeled and utilized for county administration. It could be, whatever, but that can be part of this negotiation and not negotiation, but part of the discussion.
What's the acreage on that?
7 acres.
One of the things that came out from our several public hearings was the concern about not having park space on the north end. So I would suggest that as whatever that consideration happens between Cedar City and Sitla, that thrust from the citizens there who spoke out in our public hearings be considered.
One of the questions that came up was that did we consider other sites within the city? And yes, we did. We considered a site by Smead. It was already zoned INM on, which allows for a jail to be built on. But the biggest factor there, and not that they're bad soils, but you would have to do about an 8-foot over-X. And when you over-X 8 feet, you lose about 40% of your soil. And it's already in a little bit of a floodplain and it's lower than the road. So you would have to bring a lot of material. An excavator that looked at that site said it would be extremely expensive. In fact, he called me last night, Phil Schmidt, and I thought he would be here, but he must have got tied up today. He called me last night and just said, for the record, he lives in Fiddler's Canyon and he thinks the site we're looking at is by far the best site for a lot of reasons, but mainly, in his opinion, because he's an excavator, he said the soils are the best there for this purpose. It's really good. It's gravelly. It's got a good base. And these buildings are very heavy. They require large footings, lots of steel in the concrete. And so the better the soil, the less expensive it is to build. Is that correct? Rob?
Yes, it is.
Any other questions?
Oh,
Oh, let's. Oh, yeah, Bill, right there.
In your experience with the UN side and King County side, has there been commercialization coming around that since they've been?
Have your name, please.
Dixon County.
Uena County is that building right there that you see on the screen. It's just off the main drag. I-40 that goes through, it's just to the south of that. It's kind of set back in there, so it doesn't have a street frontage, so there isn't commercial right next to it, but it sits in a pocket that's surrounded on all sides. You know, our firm actually, there's a Google.
you're making you sick.
Yeah. So, yeah, and if you zoom out just a little bit, you have the county complex, which is to the lower left where the horse track is. That's where all the fairgrounds and everything is. I-40 is the street that goes through and then angles down. Just to you have the Split Mountain Youth Center, which is the juvenile detention. And then the next building over with the white roof is the district court. The courtroom that's in the Uena County Jail is the county court, and that's that rectangle that the mouse is basically hovering over right there. They actually have a pathway where they just kind of go out the back way to take the inmates to the district court, but they also use video arraignment, which was discussed earlier by the sheriff. So, and the site that we're talking about, the reason why the building is also pushed to the back 15 acres is the way the topography works. You know, it does slope up, but it also kind of flattens out it kind of up and back there. The idea was to get it back off the road and to not have any of the good street frontage taken up by the jail and to leave that for future development, the auto mall site. We do a significant amount of retail design for RC Willey and other large retailers, as well as tons of restaurants. And it's very specific with those, grocery stores, restaurants. They run they have algorithms that they run. It comes down to rooftops and bodies within certain radii, or they don't care how much you want it. They're not putting a store unless it meets their criteria.
They would put a store back that
Yeah,
far.
and it's all, you always, frontage and visibility, the last two RC Willys, we did one in Layton that's right at the mall. It's practically on the freeway. And then we're doing another one in Idaho Falls that's basically, we're on a site much like the auto mall site where it's at an intersection of a freeway. So visibility, street frontage, traffic is important for retailers. You need to remember too that when you have a functioning jail plus the sheriff's office plus potential third-party agencies, you could have a couple hundred people a day that work there, and those people need coffee and sandwiches and places to eat, and you find that that helps.
Thank you. Can we get Bill to come up and, oh, there he is. Yeah, come on in. We just wanted you to talk about the site and how you felt about it.
Can you put that site picture up?
Which one?
The site.
Site picture?
Yeah,
Proposed building.
yes, let's see.
You gotta go to the mic, buddy.
That's true. Come,
Yeah.
please
State
tell us
your
your
name.
name.
Right now, move that this way a little bit.
I can't.
Oh, this for you, Scott. Phil Schmidt, Schmidt Construction. The county and I have talked a little bit about different sites through this, and we met out there with all the commissioners. The first site was over by Smead, and part of the problem with the Smead site was that there's a fly zone for the airport. You cannot have overnight stay on a big piece of that property. The other part of that property, there's probably over 1,000 lots of subdivision being designed and being started and working on. And another thing with that property is there is very little drainage. The drainage is it's almost flat in that area. And with that ground that's there, you're gonna have to go at least 6 to 10 feet below footings to support the structure. It's a house, even with the house, which is quite a bit lighter than these, you have to go 6 foot below bottom of footing for over excavation on that side. And the drainage is being worked on, but it's very marginal over there. So I went out with them and looked at this site.
Fiddler side, back up.
Yeah.
The Fiddlers, okay.
So we talked about Smead. I didn't talk to him about out in the valley. Can you show
That other?
this side? Yeah. Okay. We went out, we looked at this. I've taken material out of here. We used it when we built some Frank subdivision. So part of this pit back here, we've taken material out of that. You'll have to follow the soils report, and I'm sure there'll be a little bit of over-X on this site. It's not as rocky as over by Nichols Canyon Road. But the view of this site, it has great drainage potential. It has a lot more sewer capacity. The sewer line goes down and goes under the freeway. Go back to that, the original side there.
The big one?
Yeah. Okay, right over there, there's a box culvert, and that's where the sewer line goes through. And so Main Street is already pretty full. That'll actually have good sewer access. They have great drainage. There's a box culvert there at the freeway. It goes on over in Enid. They can put a nice pond. The property has slope. It's not as bad as what you might think, because if you go 500 or 600 feet, and I think there's 20, 25 different feet of elevation. If you go a 600-foot site and run 2%, that's 12 feet already. You should put in income. And so the site, the thing that I like about this site is I think the dirt's better, the access is better from people, the utilities are better, there's fiber, there's great drainage here. This gets back pretty close to a drainage easement anyhow, so nobody's gonna build right there anyway. I don't even think you can. And with this here, and the drainage here, it goes right on out that way. The other part that I like about this, and I haven't really said much about it, but the city owns property over here for a future recreational area. Right now, there's no utilities to that area, and the city's gonna have to be able to pay for all that. But if we could utilize a little bit of the jail on that side road coming up and put in water, sewer up that road, that would help get it quite a bit closer, plus the power and everything else. So I think we could use it as a benefit also, not only put the jail there, but also help to get utilities, water, and that back closer to our recreational site. And any excess dirt that comes off of this site should be placed on the recreational site, because there's no dirt. So I think a little bit of playing and so forth and communicating back and forth, I think that the county and the city and recreational people can actually help two things. I think it's a great location for the jail, but also I think it could benefit the town as far as the recreational side too. It's something that helps get the utilities back there so that we can just.
Will you talk about where you live?
Well,
you don't have to say exact.
We live up right there on Cliff Rose Drive. In fact, if you go up over here, I can show you if you want to see it. We're right between Nichols Canyon and Cliff Road, right before you get to the Ashton.
There's Ashdown, let me turn on the road here. Anyway, in there somewhere.
You don't have to, you don't have to say exactly.
We don't need to.
I'm just saying that
See
you
where
live in
the
Village
rocking chair
Canyon.
is.
I'm taking notes, who's here? Anyway, we live right there. We helped build the Fiddler's Canyon flood control structure so the development could be built down below that. We built a lot of, we did a lot, we used to do all of Frank's work, now Brian does a lot of that. Frank's not developing much of it now. The flood structure is good. I think that'll help with future development. As you go further that way, until somebody comes up and comes up to put another road in, you can't, there's no more development allowed over there until somebody puts a road. The access is only 80 lots, and right now there has to be 2 roads, and there is. And so there's really no more development goes here until there's really some major development, somebody else brings in some more roads so that they have double access. Because right now they do not have it.
Any other questions for Bill? He's quite an expert in our community, so we appreciate you.
I think it's a good thing. And right there where they're going in the back is a big canyon. And so you couldn't build there anyhow. And I think it's far enough back that it's actually going to be fine. And I like what they're proposing in the front as far as lot there. Open area to the streets that way.
So Dan Jessen had a suggestion. The sheriff did a flyover with the drone, and they did it at 70 feet above ground and then 100 feet above ground, and you can kind of see just, well, what you can't see, which is to say the homes there. I don't know if you want to speak any more to that, Sheriff. So that's looking northwest, and it's just rotating clockwise.
The idea being that you would be potentially on the roof of the building at 75 feet, depending on how high the building is, or 100 feet.
So right there, that's the pit that's been talked about, looking almost straight north now.
So when you're looking south or looking southwest, what you see, that's also what you'd see in the jail. Because it is tucked in a little bit of a divot down in there.
Yep.
That is the drainage too, right at the toe of that slope.
Yeah.
That's where the drainage channel is.
So it'll never be built on there.
Now you're almost straight east. And this is at 70 feet. We'll show it again they flew it again at 100 feet. That's the mouth of Fiddler's Canyon right there.
And Dan, you wouldn't, the roof wouldn't be much higher than 50 feet.
Yeah, so this is already, so that is looking into Fiddler's. Pause that. All right. Then almost straight south, back toward Love's now. So, and then, this is the,
Same thing, but higher.
yeah,
Bob, you said it wouldn't be more than 50 feet.
Yeah, the three-story office part, which is the jail, the sheriff's office, and
this gives you a little more topology as Rob's talking.
you're likely 14-foot floor to floor, and by the time you do stuff, you'd be around 50, 55 feet tops.
Shelley, you talked about maybe we cut that down 12 feet.
Well, you got about 25 feet you're gonna have to make up one way or the other. So you can cut and fill, but you could, you need to have at least 2% going across it anyway. The way your parking lot is, it needs to drain out. And everything's gonna drain to the north.
Yeah, the building on the south side will be
Yeah.
So
down.
what I'm saying is if we're considering 50 feet now, of course, was that 50 feet down by the pond or the pit?
Yeah, it's.
So
The thing is, though, that
Coming down 12
property
feet.
comes up, that property comes up quite a bit, so what they're showing here is with the drone, even with the 50-foot roof, up on the top, you're gonna be looking over the top of it.
So that's 100 feet, and you can start to see the roofs in Ashdown.
When you're standing out there, and you'll see at the site visit, you can't barely through the trees see the very top of that gigantic Love sign, the gas station prices. When you're back in there, you're tucked down in, and you can barely see the top of it if you look through the trees. That's standing at ground level.
And the reason we've kind of emphasized this is there was a lot of concern about, initially there was the auto mall site and there was concern about visibility. This site isn't going to be very visible, and that's kind of what these drone flights represent. So and it continues to pan.
And from the freeway.
There's the love sign right there.
You might point out where the freeway is.
Yeah, so the freeway's right there. So you get visibility, what would you say, Paul, just when you're looking straight southeast for like 2 seconds on it? I mean, I don't know.
Northeast.
Northwest.
Well, yeah, okay, but from the freeway would be southeast, yeah. Okay.
Well, if you're driving on the freeway, the main thing you're gonna see is the hill right by the freeway. That's about all you really look at.
There's just been
Jenny?
some concern about, that's the first thing we're gonna see is a jail. I don't think many
No,
people are gonna see.
Let me just ask a quick question, Jenny Hendricks. When you're talking about the line of sight.
Yeah.
Is there any issues that you have with any other facility with noise or light going into the surrounding communities?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is no, because all the other facilities we design as dark skies facilities. So all the lighting on the site is down lights, and even the perimeter lighting. If we, in a true dark skies design, you're not allowed to have any of your light go over your property line. So the reality is that they're very quiet facilities too, because even though they have outdoor recreation, it's not rowdy out there.
Would this one be designed as a dark sky facility?
Yeah, that's the intent, because, one of the things about the rural communities, you guys have much nicer sky at night than I do in Salt Lake, because it's been ruined.
Part of the tourism.
Yeah,
This-
well, and the goal here is to make as little impact as possible and to be good neighbors, so the intention would be to design it that way, yes.
What about machine gun towers and spotlights?
Yeah,
I'm only asking half tongue in cheek.
Yeah, we like the old Stalag 13 aesthetic, but what you're seeing there on the screen is a good example of what they actually look like. We designed the buildings to not look like Alcatraz. They're meant to blend in, to look like professional office buildings. And the reason why the rec yards are enclosed and kind of put in the back is because, we're intentionally not trying to call attention to ourselves.
One other thing it sounds like as a city and a county, we have an opportunity right now with Sitla and the city property to make a really good plan. We just got through the general plan. I don't think any of this was, we talked about, keeping this corridor as commercial, but has anybody taken the lead on doing that coordination? Because it's gonna have some really specific and really great communication necessary. So don't have to answer that question now. I just wanted to make the point that there's a lot of entities involved here, and I hope that communication is.
For sure, the handshake. I think it's important to note that for us, we've been looking at sites. We were offered the auto mall site by the owner, and then this other site, we became aware of it. So we're really not as far along the process as you might think.
Yeah, we haven't purchased the property.
Yeah.
And we.
But it's a point well taken though, to make
We
sure.
have the BLM guy. Did you want to say
But this
something?
gentleman's been waiting for a while.
Okay. Come on up. No, come on. State your name.
My name is Gary Suter. I live on the north end of town. I came late to the meeting, and I apologize for that, so we may cover some of this. But looking at your general evaluation, the Smead site is 1 point away from your current location that you're proposing. And all I hear is you're pushing all the positives. The north end of town is underdeveloped, and I was frustrated to hear that from the Sitla representative that it's been 15 years since the county or city or whoever is responsible for that has even looked at the north end of town to see how it can be developed. Well, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I heard.
Cedar City.
That was the last time they made an agreement with Cedar City on that land.
Okay.
But the private development has been
I don't
ongoing.
want to get tied down in an issue, so
Sure.
you're looking at it in less than 15 years. Yeah, that's okay. My point is that south end of town is to the point where it's overwhelmed. You know that. We all know that, right? So why would we want to put this in the north end of town? Well, what I'm hearing is, oh, if we put it there, then all these stores are gonna come and everything's gonna be wonderful because there's hundreds of people working there. Well, then go put it out at the Smith sign where there's thousands of homes, I understand, being developed. And we talk about excavation issues and unknown costs. The excavation at this is estimated to be X. The Smith site is estimated to be Y. You don't know, and until you get in there and do that, I just don't see how there's a positive impact on the northern end of town, putting hundreds of prisoners there. I can see how you can alleviate some of the concerns that I've heard thus far, travel, dental, judicial issues. Video conferencing works quite well. Most large companies use it now. It's an accepted legal aspect, just like electronic signatures are. I don't see that's even an issue. You have some form of medical there, other than extreme cases is what I've heard, is that's the only time these people would have to travel. So that isn't an impact in my opinion. When they go there, they're going there for a pretty long time. I'm not familiar with what your current jail holds. How many people can you hold in your current sheriff's location?
At 180, we're pretty full. Our
80?
housing,
180?
we currently can house 256, but at 180, we're pretty squished, and it's because we don't have, so this new design of jails, I always say it's like Christmas because of the segregation options. We have a housing area right now that 96 inmates are housed in one area, so that makes it where our segregation options are not possible. So yeah, about 180, and that's where we are sitting right now. We're completely smushed.
Great.
Did you have another question that I?
No,
Okay.
that's fine. Then
You haven't
then it's gonna be
looked at our other informational
So-
meetings.
okay.
Have you seen those?
I
Or
I
other-
have some of them, and I've read some articles and things that I've tried to educate myself as best I can.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a
Those
lot
came
of,
out in that.
So, yeah, a lot of these,
there's a lot of unknowns. It
well, a lot of these
sounds
issues
like.
we addressed in our February 8th and February 22nd meeting and in the March 14th meeting. I mean, they're certainly valid concerns, but we've been working on making this public knowledge for some time. So, yeah.
Sorry. Can I touch on the judicial part of your question? I just remembered that you spoke about that. Is there are some proceedings that can be handled through WebEx, so through electronically. There are some proceedings that we still have to do in person. So we have to transport the inmates for the in-person court, and that's decided by the court. That's not decided by us. If the court says the inmate needs to be there, we have to get them there. And there's some that are mandatory that the inmates have to be there for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just don't see that as a primary justification for the location. That, from my
Well,
perspective.
it's travel.
I
It is
don't-
a
I
justification
don't-
for that way.
Well, I
Because
don't-
it's close to the courts, because we do have to. Anyway, do you have another question
Well,
other than,
I guess my point is that what other, there's been a lot of effort made to decide we want to put a prison here. As it's been that's
yeah,
holding
yeah,
facility, a correctional facility,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, has there been that much effort put towards looking at how else this place
a
can be
lot.
developed?
Can the
Then
sheriff,
I understand,
that?
but where are we going with all this? What I hear is there's this major push to spend money on this here, which is fine. I have no argument with
Danny?
I have no argument with the design of your
Yeah, here's Danny
facility. I have a concern about the location of it.
Okay,
so
stay there, Danny, could you come up? So it's been 20 years since the auto mall's been developed and nothing's happened. Danny, could you talk, when you come up to the mic and speak about what's happened since we kind of been talking about?
just nothing hasn't gone on.
Danny Stewart is our economic development director.
Thank you, and it's interesting, the timing, I stepped out to take a call about this topic. So I missed some of the discussion leading up to this, but you're right, that area's been designed for some time. I focused effort on marketing that. fairly heavily to the extent that we do promote retail development here in the town. And we haven't had any takers. And really what it comes down to is the community hasn't met the demographic requirements. We don't have enough population. The population we do have doesn't have the income requirements that a lot of these large anchors are interested in. The last 2 or 3 years, retail development has really been pretty stagnant with COVID and everything else. Coming out of the pandemic, we're getting more interest, especially with the rapid growth that we've had, 6.2% in the county for 2021. And we're starting to get some interest in different things. I mentioned at a meeting with you recently that my first concern when I saw the map that came out that had a star right by the freeway and said Automall Drive, it panicked me a little bit. Yeah, that didn't sit well with me because I thought I'd spending a lot of time.
They're over here.
Yeah. So if you need any consulting on map design, just anyway, I've just for my own information, because this is not a topic that I have a lot of expertise in, I've reached out to my state partners, Governor's Office of Economic Development, Economic Development Corporation of Utah, and then some different development companies within the state to ask them, how is construction of a correctional facility going to impact my ability to recruit commercial to this area? And I was just on a call with somebody who was replying to that just now. This is a large developer that's done a lot of stuff all over the state. They're working on some big things in St. George area and in Camilla right now. And he said, it all comes down to those main things that stores and restaurants want. Is our market there? Can we make money? If there is a correctional facility there, to them it's another building. Does it create foot traffic? Because they don't have a concern about safety, security, anything else. So I've gotten this response from 3 different development groups now. Is the type of building isn't as important as the market for that area that's proposed. I've focused all of my efforts on this north interchange because we all are familiar with what's going on in the south interchange. The retail groups I've talked to want to go where the action is, and they see a lot of action at Providence Center. That's where they want to go. I have had calls since it was announced that the commission voted on this site that I've never had before, calls asking about the viability of commercial on that site. That's not saying that something's guaranteed, but I've had people come to me in the last 2 weeks who are interested in learning more about that site. I've met with some personally. I've tried to set appointments with others in the coming weeks. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my experience so far. My main concern is I don't want this announcement to hamper my job in trying to recruit retail to this part of town.
I guess I just reflect back. At this point, and what I'm hearing is development of the Sneed site and the purchase price of that may be less than the location that you're looking at now. You don't know that at this point because you haven't done the numbers yet. Again, I don't mind that you're holding people. I understand that we have people out there and we have our share of them. I want to see this personally as an area that's developed much like the south side. Until we can get an anchor store in there, I don't know, but be a Costco or a Kmart, Walmart, whatever, again, we just don't have that there. And I understand its income and numbers of people too, but you have Beaver, Myersville, Delta, people who come that far for a store like a Costco on that end of town. If they'll come, that's great. I just don't, what I hear is people pushing the design. Fine.
Well, and if I could speak to that, I've been quiet over here.
Can you tell us your name, please?
No.
Thanks.
So one of my other responsibilities on the commission besides public safety is economic development. I work really closely with Danny, and we have a really great team. And we've we've been focusing for years on trying to get these bigger companies, these box stores, these anchor type stores to understand that our demographic isn't Cedar Valley, that it's Lincoln County, that it's Beaver County, that it's Garfield County, that it, as far away as Richfield or where our shoppers come from. And so far it hasn't worked. With that being said, we do have we're able to fund a pretty major retail analysis study that's going on right now and has been. And that is our strategy, to be able to hopefully get some solid numbers of the people that do come into our area from outside and to shop here. And so that we can more effectively make those arguments. We have argued that point until we're blue in the face that Cedar City is not our regional shopping area. It's the 5-county area and even into Nevada. But that, we're hopeful that study, it was actually commissioned it prior to COVID, and we're hoping that it would be done and the analysis all back and everything. COVID screwed us up and we kind of had to start over. But we are in the middle of that marketing. We are in the middle of that marketing study now, and that marketing study is specifically designed to try and attract people to that north edge.
And we're for the first time, if I understand correctly, we're identified as the #1 micro metropolis. Based on an article that I read, we're putting in 1,000 new homes a year or more. We're certainly, every council meeting I see, we're certainly allowing homes to go all over the place. If the city wants to promote growth in an area, and you know better than me, you promote it in that area. You go ahead and say I'm going to put a new street in or whatever the secondary access is required. Again, this is my perspective based on the information I've been able to glean from the news. Sitting out here and being at the simple representative in this Friday that this was proposed, I can see that there may be some shortcomings in that area. But irregardless, I urge the city not to rezone that. So that's my piece. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Let's state your name.
I'm Dave Jacobson. I'm with the Cedar City BLM, and we just wanted to make the commission aware of some of our plans in this general area, along with the Cedar City Corporation. When we acquired this land for recreation, we started looking at trails in this area as well. So we started last fall designing and starting to look at a large trail network to the east of this location and possibly co-locating our trailhead with the Cedar City Park or something in that respect, or at least having access to the BLM land so that we could build a trail out of there. So if you can imagine some kind of trail or trail network similar to this trails that go out in the Southview trailhead to the east of this, that's kind of what we're planning. We just wanted to make you aware that that's where we're aiming for the use of BLM in your backyard.
That's awesome. We're thrilled with that, especially because we feel like that's a really right next to our sheriff's office. Very safe. We have the sheriffs coming and going, and should be a very safe, good place to have recreation. We have one more. Let's take just this one more, and then we probably ought to get out there and look at the site.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Heather Stonley, and I just have a couple of questions. So one of the questions that I have is, it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that the current site that you're looking at, it was brought forward by the landowner in exchange for land out by the landfill, for the landfill site. Is that correct?
Not.
Can I talk to that?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, let me ask my complete question, and then you can clarify everything.
Awesome.
So, because the question that was brought to my attention was just wanting a little more clarification about the details of that trade, and if there's anything beyond like a land, like equal land for land trade, or if there was anything else involved in that.
Okay. My drink's gone. So at this point, so there has been talk of a trade. At this point, that's talk. What we're doing right now the process that we're in right now is getting, thank you, the A word, getting an appraisal, not only on that piece of property, but on the property that the county owns out near Iron Springs, where Mr. Nichols owns parcels in both places. We have not come to any agreement on a trade. It's a possibility, but right now it's just too early in that process. We've got to see, our offers and the money that we spend and trades that we make are going to be based on actual appraisals. And we're just barely starting that process now. So we just don't have those numbers yet. We would hope to probably in the next few weeks, maybe be able to answer that question better. As is now, we're prepared to pay a fair market value without any trade. A trade may be possible. We're not closing the door to any options.
We want some trade if possible to reduce our cash.
Right. So we're in the middle of that. The bottom line is we're gonna try to get the best bang for our buck because it's taxpayer money. And it's really important that we treat it as such.
And Mike, I don't think Mike, but just to clarify, when I was first elected, I wanted to go out there until we figured out the sewage issue and the sheriff one, how long to be so far out. But I'd asked Frank, because we own that property right across from his hotel on the RV park, and he said, I said, well, could we trade that for a piece maybe around the corner? He said, just put it there, I'll find it. So just to clarify any rumors that Frank didn't want it there and was trying to wheel and deal some deal, he was fine with it right there. He indicated.
All right, so I would be really interested in finding out, it does seem like there are a lot of numbers that are still out there we don't have. So I'd be really interested in, in finding out more when we get those details, the appraisals, when we find out how much it would cost, the site evaluations, the comparisons. And I think that, taxpayers and citizens should have access to that information. So I would really appreciate that.
So from this point forward, the way that this kind of came about, there was a lot of talk, there was a lot of rumors, there was a lot of information floating around, a lot of misinformation that kind of started before we had any answers. And that's why we hadn't had any meetings. We literally were just having discussions. We had nothing concrete. As soon as we started to have concrete information, that's when we started our public meetings. But I would commit to you that from this day forward until the jail is built and we're all out of this discussion, that we'll continue having these public meetings. We'll make that information absolutely available. We're going to do a really good job at keeping all the information on our website, but we're going to schedule these information meetings for, as soon as there's major developments. We're going to have these meetings. It'll be really frequent. I'm more than happy to, if you've got a neighborhood group that gets together, I think any of us would be more than happy to come and talk. There's a group that wants to meet Friday afternoon. Dan and I just kind of made arrangements last night to accommodate them. We're going to talk to a group on Friday afternoon. The last thing we want to do is do any of this transaction in the dark. You're absolutely right. These are public funds. They're your taxpayer dollars. You have a right to see where every penny is spent, and we're committed to doing that. We don't want to build a jail. We really don't want to build a jail. We have to build a jail, and we're going to make this process just as open as we can and answer any questions.
I really do appreciate that, and I appreciate Paul having taken time out to show us the site last week. I know that you've really tried to reach out and help, help alleviate concerns. I do want to just take a second and to just take a little tangent because I've got some ears. But the real reason why we are so concerned on the north side is because we don't have representation. We don't have representation in the elected officials of all the people who will be making this decision. The city council, the county commission, planning commission. One person lives north in North Cedar, and that person doesn't live in our neighborhood. So that's like 18 people who are making this decision, and you're coming and you're saying, oh, this is gonna be awesome for you. Like, this is gonna be so great, it's gonna be the safest place, but it's not your backyard. And we just feel like we don't have representation, and the track record hasn't been awesome. It's not you, it's kind of everything, because, you know, we've wanted parks, we've got nothing. I know, you know, Danny says he's been trying to help get us some commercial activity out there, which we so appreciate because we need that. But what we get are multifamily units, and what we get is no parks. You know, so we don't get anything on the north side, and then all of a sudden it's like, congratulations, you're gonna get jail. And so if you maybe put yourself in our shoes as to how that feels to feel kind of neglected and unrepresented, and then all of a sudden.
I get it.
Congratulations.
Sure.
Let me say one word.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say, when I went out knocking doors, Fiddlers was my very favorite part.
Well, I remember when you came
loved
to
that.
my door.
I
remember
loved
meeting
it. They're just the great people up there. And we want to have a really nice area up there. You've got those beautiful schools there, just across this, you know, Main Street. And I know the city does too. We've been working on this, and we really want that too. And maybe there is something for the site where the jail is now to put a park. We don't know, but down the road, you know, we really want to do that. But we really need to move on.
Can I interject just for a minute? I want to speak. There's been a couple of times, even intimations that somehow the commissioners haven't been transparent. I bristle just a little bit at that. We've had multiple public hearings. And I also want to clarify, there is transparency, and I expect, and I think everyone will find that the commissioners are very transparent, but there are just a few times when a public body can have a closed session, and one of which is for negotiating for property. So to talk specifically about prices in public is probably not appropriate before the fact, because there are negotiations that still need to happen. And so I would just remind everyone that this is a legislative decision, and that means that falls to the commissioners based on all the facts to make that decision. Now, certainly after the fact, I'm sure we'll be very transparent about, you know, how we came about, but I do want to manage that expectation that you're not going to have all the information up front, because it doesn't exist yet, and it's not done being talked about. So yes, transparent, but that doesn't mean you get to sit in the room with the commissioners.
And if I can just, go ahead, no, please.
If I could just, you know, I understand that.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't just speaking of what you'd said. There's been several little remarks, so.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. I would encourage that if there is a trade that goes forth, that it will be fair, and that there won't be any special perks given to anybody.
It'll all be based on appraisal.
Yeah, and I just, so knowing that I mean, this is our project, but knowing it's our project, we're gonna do everything that we can to make that whole area successful around it. We're not looking to come and drop something in the middle of it and then walk away. We want the success as bad as you do. It's been really frustrating on my economic development. I've been involved in these discussions with the Costco's and with the Targets, and they suck. I hate those guys.
They won't go.
I do. I have my wife's first cousin is a high-ranking executive in Costco, and I sat down with her at a funeral, and she's like, "I feel your plight, but no." And this is why. I mean, basically, you have to have 250,000 people within a 60-mile radius without another Costco, and all they care about is rooftop. They suck. And so if we can, that's why we're changing our strategy to try and say, okay, let's gather more data that's more accurate, that can show the amount of people that we have here, not just rooftops. And so we're working really hard to try and change that, and to try and sway, their algorithms. So I mean, we're committed to making it a success, not just drop something there and walk away. I won't take any more time.
Can I say one thing about the trade out to the Iron Springs area? that's another thing that we're looking closely at. And the reason why is to save more taxpayer money. The reason why we're looking at that is because the logistics of our garbage trucks going out and going the way that they are, and they have to go way up to the pit. So if we go on Desert Mound Road, it'll save us a couple of miles. So that's that many more. So the things that we're looking at out there are to save Iron County's money. That's a huge part of if we do trade, that's what that will be. And I just wanted to throw that out there because it's not like we're trying to give Frank a good deal or whatever, but by going up that other way, you're right in the pit, not having to go clear up and over.
You want to talk about that a little bit? I mean,
I
that's-
think our
there it
trucks
is.
get 2 miles to the gallon.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I mean,
they're not very
if we can
good.
save 2 or 3 miles per transaction, we're literally saving.
So yeah, can you point at that,
Yeah.
John? So, Iron Springs Road,
Right here,
is you come up to there and right up to the,
so that's the shack,
that's the shack where you weigh.
or the right there, sorry.
Right there. Yep. So when you go all the way to there and then have to come clear up to the pit and see how far the pit is up that road.
Versus coming off Desert Mound Road.
That Desert Mound Road would come right there and right into the pit.
And there are logistics for us to have to work through as a county, but
Yeah.
if you think about how many times, not just Cedar or Iron County trucks, but Cedar and
And
Enoch
our,
other municipalities.
and our
citizens.
other businesses that haul garbage.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that we're looking at. So it's not like
kind of
we're
a
trying to
win-win-win.
Yeah, for us, it's not for the other landowner, it's to do something that makes sense for Iron County. So,
Before everybody gets excited, there's some major road improvements would have to be made on Desert now. It's
Right.
not wide enough, so we'd have to do some work on
It's a narrow road.
that. But it's
Yeah.
it's a great option.
It's a wonderful plan.
so
One of
it
the
may be
things that,
something down the road.
one of the things that Justin reminded me of was to just draw everyone's attention. So this is our website, ironcounty.net. And if you scroll down here, there is under quick links, new jail information. And to that point, we have literally the video from our February 8th meeting, our February 22nd meeting, a lot of the slides, the March 14th meeting, this map, which admittedly, the star probably is in the wrong place.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, not right there. But, and then some of the maps or charts that Dan has put together, and then these flyovers and then pictures. And then I believe Rob had sent us. It wasn't up there, okay.
Yeah, it's the button at the top.
So this was Rob's presentation from today. So please be aware that you all from Cedar City direct your constituents to that. Like I wrote in the email yesterday, so often if we get half a dozen of those questions answered, a lot of the big concerns seem to fade away for folks.
A lot of people don't go on the site. I'm not saying.
No.
Yeah,
But
but it's a good place, good resource.
I think that would have the possibility for information, absolutely. Sure. From my perspective, articles that are in the St. George newspaper or the Iron County Today.
So we've got Jeff Richards here.
Are more informative for me, because if you're working, like I mean,
Right.
like this, reality is
9 a.m.
doing events and things. I can sit down on Saturday and read those articles and somewhat understand how that works. And I think it's helpful, that's the most helpful.
We in fact, I had some training up north this week, and I was saying just how much I appreciated Jeff. He's the one guy that gives us voice in that regard, other than what we can do on our own website and social media. So thank you, Jeff, and we will point well taken.
I think we should go out to the site and do that portion of the, and look over the site, see how far it is off the main road.
John, can you pull up that map?
Oh.
Show everybody.
Yeah.
We need to go down that angled road, down the power line road. That's the road to go down.
Yeah, to get there.
So,
Can you show them that?
yeah, so
We'll meet right there.
So
You'll
as you
need
go to the-
four-wheel drive because it is a little bit of a rough road, so.
So this is the intersection, that's Love's, and the subway, and you go right, and right as you go off the oil, you go straight, and then make sure I'm telling them right, Paul, I think you have to veer to the right about right there.
So is there anybody that needs a ride that is in a car that would like to go with one of our people, because we've got plenty of vehicles that. If there is, come over and let us know.